Hi, this is Rick Cromie, and welcome to Oral Communication, a class that's dedicated to improving your ability to communicate with power and with purpose and with passion. This week we're going to talk about visual aids, and in particular, how to be more comfortable with visual aids. We live in a visually stimulated culture. Don't believe me? I'm going to give you a date. Let me just ask you whether or not you see something before you hear something. Are you ready? September 11th, 2001. See what I mean? Chances are you saw something a whole lot faster than you heard something. Because the verbal, while it's important, is not as powerful as the visual in communication. What we see and what comes through the eye gates actually have a greater impact upon behavior and attitudes and beliefs and thinking than any other sense that we have. Jesus talked about this in particular. He said that we have to be careful about what we let our eyes see. He understood the visual nature of our world. The eyes are the window of the soul. That's why we're told, pluck out your eyes. You know, it's more than, you don't hear him talk about tearing off your ears. It's about plucking off your eyes. Does this make sense? The eyes are so important, and yet so many speakers, so many communicators, so many individuals, preachers even, who week in and week out deliver lectures and sermons and messages, miss this most important vital piece. So let's talk about getting comfortable with visual aids. You know, when we dealt back in a couple of the previous projects, I talked about how visual aids were one type of support material that you can use for a speech. And that's because people remember best what they simultaneously see and hear. Consequently, visuals are a very powerful tool for a speaker. Now there's several benefits, but let me just give you 5 benefits for using visual aids in your messages or your sermons or your speeches or whatever communication you decide to do. Number 1, visual aids increase understanding. Again, we're in a visual age, and most of what we learn is ingested through our eyes, not our ears. Visual aids help you convey messages in the dimension best suited to clear understanding. Secondly, visual aids save time. Information presented visually is received and processed by the brain much faster than a verbal message. Visual aids are especially useful in helping people quickly understand complex or abstract ideas. I love to use a metaphor. I love to use pictures as a way of communicating because, well, we hear it a lot of times. It's a very common mantra that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Really? So then why do so many speakers use 1,000 words when just one picture will do? And imagine what one 2-minute video clip will do, or any other type of visual out there as far as communicating what you're wanting to do. Third, visual aids enhance retention. People remember an average of just 10% of the spoken message in a week after it's presented. However, they will remember up to 2/3 of what they both see and hear. And of course, if they can talk about it and even experience it, that's even more helpful. Number 4, they promote attentiveness. People think much faster than you speak, so their minds tend to wander during a speech. Visuals help them stay focused on your message. They also add variety and interest to a presentation. 5, visual aids help control nervousness. Displaying visual aids gives you purposeful physical activity that lets your body process nervous energy without distracting the audience. I would also say that it helps you as a speaker because if you have the visual aids in front of you, and when I speak, I have mine on a laptop, so I can actually see what the next slide is. I know what slide I'm on, and my computer tells me what slide is coming next. So as I speak, I can make seamless transitions to the very next slide, to the very next point, to the very next part of my message or speech or training, whatever I'm doing. So let's talk now about how do we select the right visual aid. You see, the most common visual aids are computer-based aids. You know, But you also have things like flip charts and whiteboards and props and objects that you can use. Very old school. Some people still might use transparencies. I'm not even going to talk about those, because if you're still using transparencies, you do need to get up to date in your technology, because there's far better ways to put up visuals than through a transparency. But your choice for a particular speech depends on several factors. Let me just give you a few. First of all, what type of information are you trying to convey? That's important. Visual aids will help you with that. The size of the audience, it's important. The bigger the audience, the more you want to use a visual aid. The smaller the audience, the more you might be able to get away without a visual aid. But the larger the audience, the more important. And by the way, by visual aid, I do not mean a PowerPoint with words on it. I do not mean a PowerPoint with a little tiny picture and lots of words. I'm talking about using PowerPoints or Keynote, if you use Mac, that has complete full pictures and with words that are 1 to 2 or 3 words, or very few words. It's mostly about the picture. Another factor to consider when selecting the right visual aid is the equipment that's available to you. For me, as a professional trainer, I carry my own video projector because I don't know what's going to be out there, what's going to be available to me. And even when I'm told there's going to be a projector on the available, that doesn't mean that I'm going to not take mine. I've learned to always take mine with me, and it's a hassle to get through airport security, trust me. But I always take it with me. Also, you need to talk about the time available, or think about the time available to prepare your visuals. I have some workshops coming up here in a couple weeks, and right now I'm under a lot of time constraint, even with this particular session that I want to get out to you. And so I'm thinking about, what can I do? How much time do I have, and how can I do this the best way possible? And then finally, the amount of money you can afford to spend. Maybe you can't afford that projector. Maybe you can't afford a laptop. Maybe you can't afford to go Mac over, a Windows machine. Although I got to tell you, if you do Mac, you're going to find it's far more user-friendly and far better. Keynote is a superior presentation model, a platform than PowerPoint. Anybody who's ever gone to Keynote will tell you that. But PowerPoint is PowerPoint. It's better than nothing. So let's talk first of all about computer-based visuals. You see, the technology for computer-based visual presentations is rapidly changing. So even as I'm speaking here, by the time I get this down on tape and in video and out there to you, a whole lot of different things could happen. Some things can change. Using a laptop computer is a part of this. Presentation software, whether it's, again, PowerPoint or Keynote. Some people like to use Media Shout. There's also Presenter Pro out there. There's a number of different platforms as far as software. There's also some platforms that you can use that are online. One of the best is Prezi. Check out Prezi. It's a great way to present using a cloud-based presentation software. You're going to need a screen and other equipment. But you have those available to you. You can produce and display some dramatic visual aids, including animated backgrounds as well as simulations. Computer-based visuals are becoming the standard for most presentations, especially in the business world, in the education world. The church world is coming along, but it's even becoming standard there. They can be used for large and small audiences and can convey simple as well as complex information. If you use a remote control, you can change the visuals while walking around the room, and that gives you more freedom of movement, which I love. However, the equipment needed can be expensive to purchase or rent. And like most electronic equipment, it can be sensitive. So you want to plan to devote plenty of time for creating the visuals in advance. That's key. But you also want to make sure that all the electronic components are working together and you've rehearsed with them, you understand them. You need to have a backup plan in case there's any technical problems. I always say you better be able to get up there and present your information without it. But if you've done your homework and you've done your work, if you've prepared properly, as we've talked about already, if you've done that, then a presentation with visuals can be very powerful and very influential. Let's talk about flip charts for a moment. Flip charts are used for more small group trainings or briefings, or for brainstorming sessions, or perhaps when you're trying to communicate to a small group of people. For example, some of you in the church world will present to elders or to deacon bodies or maybe to a small committee somewhere. So flip chart's not a bad way to go. They're great for recording audience responses because you can use them to display information. You can immediately turn around and write something up on there. It's hard to do that a little bit more with PowerPoint, but with flip charts, you can definitely do that. You can also prepare them in advance and have the flexibility to add on to them as you speak. Here is a tip though with flip charts. Write on every second or third page so that succeeding visuals won't show through. And of course you also want to use colorful crayons or markers. And then during your presentation, you can then tear the pages from the pad and tape them to the wall for display. It's a very wonderful way to present, and it's definitely low tech, but hey, for some of us, that gets it done. It's better than nothing. Another visual aid is just blackboards or whiteboards. Let's just go with whiteboards because that's more the standard anyway. These are available in a lot of different meeting rooms out there. Most churches now have them. They're useful for small audiences, allowing you to display simple lists, graphs and diagrams, and again to record audience responses. However, they do require thorough cleaning. That's the downside to them. You got to clean them before every use, and you can't save the material on the board unless you transcribe it to a computer or paper, or you write save on it. But chances are, if you're using that room for multiple purposes and multiple crowds, you're not going to be able to save that material that's written on that board. And some of us, when we get to teaching, we write some pretty good stuff up there, and that can be a detriment. Let's talk also about props for a moment. A prop is an object that contributes to your speech. It could be a book or a ball, a tool, or a model, or any other item that helps you make your point and helps the audience to better understand and remember your message. You may need a table to place that prop on when you're not using it, and perhaps a cloth. I recommend a cloth to cover the prop up from view until you're ready to use it. A lot of times I keep my props hidden. I put them behind the podium. I put them underneath a chair. I just keep them out of sight because if the audience sees the prop, then a lot of times they can focus on that prop and miss a bunch of what you're trying to say. Visual aids. All right, let's talk about when to use visual aids, because visual aids are not intended to be the presentation. They are intended to complement a presentation. So charts, graphs, diagrams, models, pictures, printed words, they all stimulate your audience and increase the retention of your material. But you don't need a visual aid for every sentence you say or every point you make. Can I repeat that? You don't need a visual aid for every sentence you say or every point you make. Now, if you're a professor out there listening to this, you definitely need to get this. Your PowerPoint or your Keynote presentation is not the place for you to display your notes for the students. I know it makes it easier on us to put all that information up there, but the truth is your students don't need all that, and what happens is they disengage. And in fact, a lot of words is a lot of words. And for those who are more ADD in their minds, and there's a lot of people today that are very, have attention deficit disorder, it's just a struggle. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. You don't need a visual aid for every sentence you say or every point you make. In fact, if you emphasize everything, then nothing seems important. So I would recommend you use them only, first of all, when you need to reinforce a main point. To reinforce a main point. A visual aid tells the audience that what you just said or are about to say is important and something that they should remember. Main points. Secondly, to enhance understanding or remembrance of complex material. Visual aids can help the audience understand things such as relationships, construction, and statistics. So maybe you've got a complex thought, maybe you've got an abstract subject that you're trying to help the audience understand. Then by all means, use a visual aid, use a metaphor, use something that they can see to understand that. But you don't have to do that on every point. And then also, use a visual aid whenever you need to save time. Sometimes the same message is communicated faster and better through visuals rather than the spoken words. This is where I love to use video clips. We haven't talked about video clips, but there's a lot of great ways that you can use video clips out there. In fact, I'll give you a resource right now. It's www.wingclips.com. It takes, for those of you who are involved in preaching in particular, these are all short video clips that come from movies, current movies out there that you can then inject into your messages. And they're like postmodern parables, folks. And what you can do is you can take these wing clips or any movie clip. I mean, I have the software to where I can clip my own, and so I have a vast movie collection, so a lot of times I'll clip my own and show it that way. But if you show something really short, you want to keep it under 3 minutes. You're not meant to show the whole movie. It's not meant to be an introduction to a movie. You're not even affirming the movie. That's something that needs to be said, because there's sometimes, and for me personally, I never show R-rated clips. I think the only R-rated clip I've ever shown has been Passion of the Christ. I can't think of any other. I mean, there's some great R-rated clips out there. I'm thinking even of like Saving Private Ryan. Didn't use it. I try when I'm speaking publicly, and especially in a church situation, to use only PG-13 and below clips. These are more family friendly, and I definitely am going to be able to find a clip that doesn't have the language problem. But it saves time. If I'm trying to hammer a point, why do I want to talk for 5 minutes about what this point looks like when I can say, here, take a look at this clip and you'll get an idea about what this is all about. Some people use visual aids as prompts for their presentations, relying on them as notes. Visual aids do not replace preparation. You still must be so thoroughly familiar with your presentation that you can give it even without using visual aids. Do you hear me? You have to be prepared so that you can take the visual aids away and you can still do it. All right, let's talk about some design guidelines. So if you're getting ready to put together, and this week, for those of you in my class taking this for credit, you'll be actually putting together a PowerPoint or a Keynote or a small Prezi. So here's some design guidelines I want you to pay attention to. And if you're not listening to these videos, I'm going to know it right now. You see, to be effective, visual aids should be easy to read and understand, as well as pleasing to view. So whatever type of aids you are creating or using, use and consider the following guidelines. Number 1, make them visible. Everyone in the room must be able to see your visual aid. Use the largest possible lettering in both upper and lower cases. Use blank space to make your text stand out. Number 2, limit each visual to only one main thought or point. More than one point distracts the audience. So I know on some occasion I do use the bulleted list, but usually what I like to do is, even when I'm dealing with a bulleted list, is to take that bulleted list and make a different visual for each list point. So if I'm going to have the bullet list play out, I'm going to have it play out with a different picture or a different image of some sort. Third, use no more than 6 lines of text and no more than 6 words per line per visual. This keeps the text big enough for the audience to read. For me, I have a standard that I work by and I recommend, and that is no less than 28-point font. And for me personally, I try to go no less than 35 and try to stay around 40-point font or larger. So that visual, those texts, when it's seen, it's easily seen and it pops out. I also try to avoid fancy types of text. I know there's some there's some font types out there that are very, very attractive and engaging. Maybe I might use them as far as the main slide to kind of set the idea. But when it comes to main points and subpoints, just stay basic. Just stay basic. Something that's simple and easy to read, bold and clear. 4, keep them simple. Avoid cluttering a visual aid with too much artwork or fancy graphics or even animation. Your audience should be able to quickly grasp the visual aid's point. One of my pet peeves, and I used to be guilty of this myself until some of my students called me on it, and that is animations. Some of you may remember old school PowerPoint. You could have these little animation cartoon things going, and it just got goofy. And even today, you have to be careful about what you animate with. Another thing to consider is to use color carefully. Colors add interest and improve retention, so you want to choose colors that enhance readability. For example, black letters on a dark blue background are difficult to read, and you have to avoid using light colors on light background for the same reason. Also avoid using too many colors. 2 or 3 are enough. Now the cool part about it is if you're using PowerPoint or Keynote, they already have design graphic presentations to start with. And they're already wonderfully colored for you. Don't change the colors. Don't change the colors. Unless you're a design aficionado, you shouldn't be doing that. Use the colors that are there because experts have already put together a great match that's easy on the eye. You also want to make them consistent. Include some consistent design elements such as font, colors, artwork, etc. These are going to make your visual aids more pleasing again to the eye. Also use different types of visuals. Variety, it's the spice of life. If you're given a presentation with computer-based visuals, for example, follow a bar chart with a text visual or a diagram. Or don't be afraid if you're using PowerPoint to also have an object lesson included in there, or to use a flip chart as part of your presentation. Finally, make sure you proofread all visuals for spelling and grammar. Another pet peeve of mine, especially in churches with worship and some of the lyrics that go up. If your visual aid is a graph, table, chart, or diagram, be sure to title it so the audience knows what it is. But again, spelling and grammar, make sure the information is correct. Okay, let's talk about display tips for a moment. Using visual aids successfully requires practice. So you got to watch how you display them and when to display them, because if you display them too soon, too late, or too quickly, it decreases their impact. So think about some of these tips. Number 1, display a visual just before you're ready to talk about it. Your audience is going to look at the visual the moment you display it, so pause, giving the audience time to read and comprehend it, then begin discussing the point. Number 2, maintain some eye contact with the audience as you display the visual. Don't talk to the screen or flip chart or read from it. Boy, I see this a lot from beginning speakers and preachers in particular. They will look up to the screen and they'll read from the screen. Make sure you display the visual aid long enough. Show the visual as long as it takes for you to discuss the point it makes, then remove it. You don't need to continue to show a visual after you've moved on to a new point, so keep that in mind. 4, don't block the visual. The entire audience must be able to see it, so if you're projecting a visual onto a screen or using a flip chart, stand off to the left side. To point out something on the screen or chart, use your left hand or a pointer or a laser pointer, something like that. If you're holding an object for the audience to see, display it to the left or right of your body. A very common faux pas in presentations is for presenters to walk in front of the projector or overhead. It's gotten a little bit better now that things are being projected through TVs or behind the screen video projectors. But if you're projecting, and you can actually walk into the light of your projector and put a shadow on the screen, that is to be avoided at all costs because it's just a low-tech, low-end rookie mistake in presenting. 5, don't write as you speak. We've just talked about this, but if you're writing on a flip chart or like overhead transparency, pause as you write, then turn back to the audience and begin to speak. 6, display the correct visual. If you forget part of your presentation or present material out of sequence, you may unwittingly display the wrong visual. I have this key, and this is one of the reasons why I like to see what's coming up next on my laptop. But before I had that ability, I would print out all my slides so I knew exactly what order they were. I also had them numbered because here's a little tip when you use PowerPoint or Keynote. If you want to go to a particular slide, you just click that number or type that number in and hit enter. So if you're on slide number 5, for example, and you need to go to slide 8 and skip some material, all you have to do is type 8 and then enter, and it'll go from 5 to 8 automatically. It's a great little tip. Number 7, have your visual aids ready. Before your presentation, check the room to make sure listeners will have clear views of your visuals. Put them in place and be ready to use them. Double check any electronic equipment to make sure it's functioning right. What I do is I will actually sit out in the crowd in various places and I will look to see what they are going to see. I will have my visuals running. I'll run through several of the images, and in particular if I'm running videos, I have embedded videos in all my presentations. I'll listen to make sure that the volume's right. I do all of that before the first person even enters the room. So I'm sitting there and I'm going through my presentation. I'm sitting in different parts, and I can tell right away if I'm sitting behind a pole. Well, that's not good. Sometimes there's poles or there's objects, or I have to move them, and if I can move them, obviously I will. Number 8, and finally, rehearse. Rehearse. Practice with your visuals until you can display them smoothly and confidently. And then let me conclude by just saying this: you need to have a backup plan. If you're using computer-based visuals or any other type of electronic equipment, be prepared for technical failures. If something goes wrong, keep speaking, and don't waste the audience's time while you try to replace a burned out light bulb or change a cable. If necessary or appropriate, have some paper copies of your visuals ready to distribute to the audience. I have been in many situations where my technology simply did not work. It went down, and in the extreme cases, I had to go on without it. And they are very, very rare because I always have a backup plan. I was presenting once, and I was using their projector, for example, and we worked and worked and worked on this in preparation. And I even, the night before, I'd come in and I'd spent time, but the next morning when I got there and I plugged my laptop into their projector, for some reason it wasn't projecting right. There was a technical issue. It was presenting only pushing up part of what was on my laptop. It was really bad, and I tried and tried and tried to fix it, but people were starting to come in. And I had about 10 minutes before we were to start, and I realized that that was the go time for me. At 10 minutes, that's when I run my backup plan. And I literally reached down and pulled out. I already had it ready to go. I already had it plugged in. It was on the floor. All I had to do was put it up on the little table there and take off the other one. But in a matter of 30 seconds to 1 minute, I had replugged in my computer to my own laptop projector, which I knew was going to work, and I was off and running. My presentation didn't miss a beat. I started right on time. So have a backup plan. It's very, very important. Okay, let's talk about this week now, because there are several things I want you to do. First of all, you need to read Chapter 10 from the Icebreaker, pages 137 to 146. Hope you're enjoying that book. It's a great book. Secondly, I want you to create a PowerPoint, Prezi, or Keynote for your final speech. Next week, your final speech is going to be due, and I need you to put together a PowerPoint. I want you to put together maybe you want to use Prezi or Keynote. I don't care what you use, but it needs to be 8 to 10 slides, and it needs to adhere to the guidelines that I presented here. So if you have been listening and you've been taking good notes, you know what I'm looking for. I want you to submit that to me. I also want you to do a very small speech, very short speech, only 2 to 3 minute speech. And what I want you to do is an object lesson. And there's no audience here, so you don't have to worry about that. But I want you to do a 2 to 3 but I want you to create a 2 to 3 minute object lesson that explains a biblical concept or a theology. Maybe you want to do an object lesson that explains grace, for example, or justification, or an object lesson that helps a person understand, God's love. Then I want you to upload it to YouTube or Vimeo, submit the notes, and post the link in that discussion area. So not only are you going to post your own link, then I want you to go back and watch 2 or 3 other people's and comment on what they put together and give them helps and insights and just really help them improve their own. Make sense? Okay. That's working with visual aids. And visual aids are important. They're great. One of the best visual aids out there is the clock, at least for a presenter, because it's what keeps you on time. And I'm out of time right now. So thank you very much for